All right. Welcome to the very first episode of Short Bites, a Stephen King
Short bite.
podcast. How's it going, Michael? It's been a long time since, well, we were talking before I, started recording, but how's it going
Yes,
with you, man?
man, it is great. I'm doing really great. I am closing in on my next book. I'm just going to announce it here. It will be out later this year.
Yay.
Now I
Oh, wow,
cannot back
wow.
out of it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Now I cannot. It's going to be more of a sci-fi than what you are all used to, but
Yeah.
still got my flavor.
That's good. That's good. Uh if any I'm sure nobody really knows because we haven't done it since like 2018, I think, or 19, but you and we used to host the Darkness Dwells podcast together.
Oh, I loved that. Has it really been that long ago?
I think so.
That
It's
was
like
I had the
maybe
time of my
2019.
life. 2018.
It was at least 2019 when I stopped doing it because I just couldn't do it
Yeah.
anymore. I was
Yep, I
working.
remember we did at least a few in 2019.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was like doing the factory job and I was
Yeah,
just it was awful. So so we took a long break from podcasting together and now we're back
we are better
and
than ever,
we're gonna
crankier than ever.
yeah, and we're gonna be talking about Stephen King short stories. Um
Woo!
and not just Stephen King short stories, we're also going to be covering the novellas and the novella collections. So this episode here is just an introduction, and I'm just going through what we're going to be talking about mostly going forward. And I figure that if I'm still doing this after all the short stories are done, I might just move on to the novels. I don't know, we'll see. But there is like a plethora of content here. It's almost endless. Stephen King is a writing machine. And so there's plenty of Stephen King podcasts out there, and I've been listening to them a lot. So, um, you know me, I like doing what I like listening to or watching.
Yes,
So how have you been, Michael? Last 5 years.
man,
I think I
let's
talked
go
to you.
back to blank.
I think I talked to you on Weird Reads when you released Plank Children.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's been way too long since I've released anything. I took a step back from social media for probably 3 years now. I couldn't take it. There's just so much arguing and
Yeah.
infighting
Yeah.
and just I just couldn't do it. So I walked away, but I've been great in the meantime.
That's
Not
great.
reading as much as I wish I would. Um, Neither have I been writing as much as I wish I would, but it's not a resolution for 2025. No resolutions. They are made to be broken. Just goals for me. Reading more, writing more, get back into that swing.
Yeah.
And boom, my friend Jason calls me up to do some podcasting again. So,
Yeah.
in an all new studio, this place looks so cool.
Awesome. Are you still living in the same place? Because I
I
remember you
am.
moved a few years ago.
Yeah, I moved in 2019 and I am still here.
Nice. And so you survived the pandemic in and where you're living right now.
I did. And not to downgrade anybody, uh, of course, but being a loner and kind of a recluse myself, pretty much nothing changed
Yeah.
for me. Um, so that was weird hearing about seeing on TV programs and just everywhere. Everybody's going crazy because they're stuck in the house. And I'm just like, oh, good. There's new delivery options. Not to
Things that didn't.
downplay anybody's suffering because I did have it. I did get it right in
Yeah.
the beginning. I've never
Yeah.
been that sick in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an interesting time though, wasn't it? Like
It
seeing the streets all
was,
empty during rush
yeah,
hour and yeah.
yeah, a seminal experience that.
It was almost like being in the stand for a little bit there.
Yes, yes, very much so. I'm glad you said it.
Were you one of those guys who reread The Stand during the pandemic?
I was going to. I started to. read his the complete and revised The Stand, but the parts that he updated kind of rang false to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I put it on the shelf and I didn't pick up the original The Stand,
Oh,
but I'm still thinking about reading it. So
yeah. Actually, I'm gonna reread it this year, I think, because they have that anthology coming out later in the summer. It's all stories set in the Stand universe by all these authors,
yeah,
and that sounds like it's gonna be pretty awesome, honestly. So
that sounds good.
yeah, I wanna check that out. So I thought I'd reread the Stand because they take concepts from the Stand and just sort of like expand on it.
Yeah.
So I can't remember the name of it. You know, when you go to do these podcast episodes, you never think that you're going to go into this territory, and then you're like, "Damn it, why didn't I look it up?" It's like, oh, because I
Yep.
wasn't going to talk about it. That's why.
Yep. Danger. Danger. Yeah, I'll blow it up. So what? So you're going to read the original edition or the complete and
Oh, you.
revised?
Oh God, I'll probably go with the uncut because that one's easier to find.
The uncut one.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I should give that one a chance again.
It's like what, 400 pages longer or something like that.
Something like that. It's a good chunk,
It is a good chunk.
you know.
Yeah.
Not like those DVDs that say bonus footage and it's 5 minutes. It's,
Yeah, I hate
this
that.
was
Like,
worth the extra $10 to get the
I bought
director's cut.
this. I bought this specifically for bonus
Yes.
footage, and I got nothing. Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
so
gosh.
true, man. Yeah. So, Michael, what was your Stephen King origin story? How did you come to start reading Cy King?
So my Stephen King story starts with my family. I was really young, fourth grade,
Mm-hmm.
and we went over to some friends of my parents, and their one daughter who was older than me. They were kind of like grandma and grandpa, we called them. And she was telling us about this book she was reading about there was this cemetery where pets would go and they came alive, and she told me this the synopsis of this book, and it was so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to the first Stephen King I actually read was that Here There Be Tigers, I think, with the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But my very first real King experience is appropriately The Stand. That was his
Nice.
first book. And then, of course, I did discover Pet Cemetery, and oh my God, this was the book she was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, wow. And how old were you when you read that?
I know I was reading King for sure in seventh grade. Might have been sixth, fifth as well.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty incredible. That's a fairly typical story for King readers that a lot of people, excuse me, a lot of people came to him when they were like probably way too young.
Yeah. I was now in hindsight, I understand why my dad made such a fit out of I was reading and watching things that I was too young for. Now that my mind is fully warped as an adult, I think I should have heeded his warnings, maybe.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, though, a lot of that type of stuff, you're too young to really recognize like the things that you do recognize when you're an
Yes.
adult. So
Yep.
it kind of goes over your head. You're more there for the monsters and
Yes.
all the fun
Yeah.
stuff, and all the deep family stuff or whatever's going on kind of goes over your head, unless you've experienced it, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I read Pet Cemetery for only the second time, like 5 or 6 years ago, it hit me so much harder because now I am an adult and
Oh yeah.
I've experienced death, and all of it just hit me in a different way. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. I read it before having my son. and I thought it was a cool story, one of my
Yeah.
favorites, you know. And then I read it after Keenan
Oof.
was born, and I was
Yeah.
like, Jesus Christ! Like
Yep.
I knew it was going to be hard, you know, but I still
Yeah.
did it. Yeah, that's a good one though. Was Stephen King sort of your entry into reading books by yourself and or horror?
Um, that was mostly Ray Bradbury. I know for
Okay,
sure I started Bradbury in the sixth grade, and the summer before sixth grade or after, I just went through all of his collections.
awesome.
Um, and of course, the my favorite is, of course, the October Country, which are stories by Ray Bradbury that are more macabre
Yeah,
before he went into the more hard hitting kind of sci-fi.
yeah,
And I think Bradbury was my gateway drug. Something this
awesome.
wicked, this way comes.
That,
That's
that's That's interesting because King wasn't my gateway either. I started off reading these weird little Vietnam war books that were serialized by a couple of war veterans, and they were pretty kind of trash, except they tried to be realistic.
yep,
Um, and that was fun. And then I just had this craving of reading horror, so I went to Robert R. McCammon. He was my first horror,
yeah,
and he blew me away. And then I started reading Kuntz and John Saul.
yes, that's right. I read a
Yeah,
lot of Coons.
and then I don't know why, but I did not go to King until I was like in my late teens. And somebody was talking to me like, how you've read all these other horror authors, how come you haven't read Stephen King? And I was like, that's a great question. I think I was intimidated by, you know, the size of his books. His
Yeah,
books are so crazy big. So
yeah.
I went with Misery. Was my first Stephen King.
Oh, what a
Yeah,
book!
I know, right?
Oh,
It made me a fan. Uh,
yep.
I've never reread it though, and I really should rectify that. But I
I
have.
reread it every few years.
Oh
I've
yeah,
read that a lot, a lot.
I need to reread it because well, I just, you know, I just need to, but it won't be this year because I have a lot of rereads on the table.
Yeah.
I want to read as we were talking about, I want to reread The Stand. I also want to reread It,
Oh, gosh.
and I also want to
That's-
reread like From a Buick 8 if I can, and a couple of others, but that's a lot of pages right there.
It is.
Yeah.
The only one that I haven't read yet, there are a couple. Holly, because I really don't like that character.
You don't like Holly?
And yeah. Oh my God. I never even tried. I bought it because I need to have it in first edition and I stowed it away.
Oh,
But
you
at
know,
some point I'll,
I
hungry for
think
king and nothing else.
I think you'll like Holly in Holly. She's progressed.
Well, if
Have you
you recommend it, I will read it then.
have you how much of Holly have you read?
All
Was
of
it only in
just
Mr.
the Bill
Mercedes or
Hodges trilogy.
okay, yeah. She's kind of she changes. I think she starts to change in If It Bleeds,
Yes. Yeah, she really did.
and then and she's also in The Outsider. Have you read that one?
Yes, that's right. I knew there was another one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The Outsider, which started so strong and just kind of,
Yeah, kind of lost the momentum.
yeah.
And I don't blame Holly for that, but Holly
No, no.
comes right when the momentum is lost. And but
That's so true. That is true. But as much as I dislike her, no, that wasn't her presence. Wasn't what
no, it was like,
did it.
how do we go forward from here? We need like an
Yeah,
outside source, and so they bring in Holly, right? It could have been anybody, right? So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but in
It's not about
Holly, in the book Holly itself, that's a very fun read. I think you might like the character Holly a bit better after reading
okay.
that one.
I will
We'll
read
see
that
though.
after I finish. I'm on a little bit of a Philip K. Dick
Oh,
kick.
nice, nice, yeah.
Reading "Flow My Tears," the policeman said.
Oh, I read that one.
Oh
I
yeah,
can't remember it. I read it
yeah.
like 10 years ago or more, but yeah, I
The
like it.
famous singer and talk show host that ends up being not having any ID. He's kind of like a non-person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah. All right. So, what is your favorite King novel? This is one I have trouble answering, honestly. But what is yours?
I have about three that rotate. Maybe skirting the question a little bit, but
No.
it.
You know what? You can definitely name more than one.
Okay. Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, The Dead Zone. It.
It.
Definitely it. I think that's probably his best work.
Nice.
The Shining, you know, ugh. Especially The Shining because that was the old 70s style with really dense paragraphs and everything.
Yeah.
I like that style. Um, and then I would say Misery, definitely.
Misery is good.
So
Yeah.
those three kind of revolve for oh, this is my favorite. That's my favorite. Those
Yeah.
three. And,
Oh.
and what about yourself?
Oh man. Like I said, I can't because there's only been a couple of clunkers that I've read from Stephen King, I think anyway. So whenever I finish reading a Stephen King, I'm like, that was really good. That's my new favorite.
Yeah.
But I would say The Outsider I recently read within the past year, and that one blew me away. Like we were talking about that one, and you're right that it loses momentum at about halfway to the 3/4 mark, but that first
Oh, yeah.
half to three
Yep.
quarters is just like, oh my god,
Yep.
what's going on?
Yep.
I don't I'm a journeyman reader. I don't necessarily need a great ending
Yeah.
for it to be a
I
favorite. So
yeah, everyone says that King's endings suck, but it's just kind of been Under the Dome that really sucked for me. I don't get it.
Under the Dome was such a weird ending, wasn't it? Like
It was thousands of pages from Stephen King based on the Simpsons movie. What the fuck?
yeah, that was very strange. I think I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I think he probably just didn't. He wanted to put a reason, I guess, as to what was going on, and he didn't have to. I think it would have been better if we just left it sort of ambiguous.
Yeah. Yep. I love ambiguous
Yeah,
endings
me too.
anyway, though, because that was a great book and he handled that ensemble so well. I guess his three big ensemble novels would be It, Under the Dome, and The Stand.
Yeah, maybe you could probably add needful things to that.
Yes. Yep. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, and maybe to some extent, Salem's Lot. It has a big cast,
It
but
was, but
it was his
I
first
didn't
effort at
find
doing
them
that.
like at equal level, whereas in the other books, they were like all main characters of their own kind of milieu until they came together.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
little like The Walking Dead.
yeah.
I do
um,
want to, you mentioned clunkers before. You and
mhm.
I share a guilty pleasure of the Tommy Knockers.
Yes, we do.
I
I
love that book.
I do too, especially the first part there with Jimmy and what's her name? Anderson.
Yeah,
Something Anderson. I can't remember. But yeah, those two characters, the alcoholic and the writer.
yeah.
I just love that.
I mean,
You know,
why would I possibly like that?
I don't know. It is a lot of people say it's a mess,
Most
and
people
it
do.
kind of is, but I don't know. I kind of think of it as like a bunch of stories that just kind of come together. What do you
That
call
is
that?
really interesting that you say that because King has gone on record and said this book wasn't so much written as it was carved out.
Yeah, yeah. And he was also really, really fucked up on cocaine when he wrote it. Which,
I don't, that spanned a lot of his books.
yeah, it was. I think it was the end though. I remember. I think it's on writing where I read that he had like Kleenexes stuffed up his nose to try to block the bleeding from all the coke he was doing while he was writing that book.
And I think you told me that he doesn't even remember writing Cujo.
Yeah, he doesn't remember writing Cujo, and he probably doesn't remember a lot of Tommy Knockers either.
Bobby Anderson.
Bobby Anderson, that's it. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I love those
Sorry to
two characters.
interrupt. I was Googling
No,
that and
no,
had to
that,
burst
that
it out.
that's not interrupting. That's putting us back technically on track, right?
Oh, of course. I just wanted to get us back on track.
I don't know if I'd call Tommyknockers my favorite, but I don't
Yeah.
hate the novel like everyone else does.
I
Um,
think it is just it really stays with me, and it's one of my top favorites of his because if she just hadn't tripped, it was just that little tiny bit of the ship, just tiny, and she just happened to trip. Walk to and from, on that path 100 times, but she just happened to trip,
yeah,
and that led to complete devastation.
it
I
led
love
to some night digging.
it. Sure did. Working on some night moves. Oh God, I started singing first episode.
No night digging. Not for a guy that looks like me. That's a joke from a comedian. Uh, yeah. So okay. Before we move on to the next question, I just want to mention a couple more of my favorites. I mentioned The Outsider, but I'm afraid of. Or I'm afraid. Well, I am kind of afraid. But I do love the old classics too, like It. That's
Yes.
definitely a favorite. The Stand, Salem's Lot. I reread that one within the last year, and that was still great. S- Pet Cemetery.
Yeah.
Those are all favorites. They're
Yeah.
just
That
nasty little
that's the other
stories,
one. Pet Cemetery. Pet Cemetery might be my favorite,
Yeah, it
actually.
could be.
I
It
think
could
that
be.
transcends the revolving three, Pet Cemetery.
It's
Yeah.
such a sad and by the end terrifying story. But
Mhm.
it's really a story about family.
It
And
is.
upon a reread, you're like, you just know that this family is doomed.
Yeah.
And
He
it's
was
almost tragic because
it
you really
is.
enjoy them.
It is.
Yeah.
It's heartbreak. It's a strong novel. It's
Hmm.
really strong. I think remember that he said that he almost didn't publish it?
Yeah, he kept it in a drawer.
Yeah,
And the only
because it was
reason
too
why he
dark.
pulled it out was because the only reason why he brought it out is because he was at the end of his contract with, I think it was Viking.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure who it was, but anyways, he only had one more book, and he's like, I'll just give this one to them so I can get out of that contract because there was another contract he was eager to sign or something like that with another company,
Yeah.
and end up becoming like a fan favorite. He
Just
didn't
amazing.
he didn't like it because he didn't like the dark ending. I
Yeah.
can understand
Which is so
why.
funny for King.
Yeah. So, do you have any least favorite Stephen King books?
Right now, I can definitely say his last one, You Like It Darker. I, I it's a collection.
The
I
last collection,
know
yeah.
I was unable to finish the first story. And I looked to see how long it was. I really stopped reading it. Yes. So I closed that collection for a while. Then I brought it out again. The couple stories after that are really good. Oh, I don't know, well, really good. But Willie the Weirdo, love that one.
Hmm.
Um, I was reading what's this? What's the one that I am Coughlin's
Oh,
Bad
Danny
Dream?
Coughlin's Bad Dream, yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's a
But
novella length. It's like 150 pages, I
it
think.
really
Yeah.
is. It really is. Um, it seems that King wants to be a detective thriller writer
He does, yeah.
at
He
this
does that
point.
mostly now, yeah.
So I think that caused my kind of disillusionment. I'm going to pick through the rest of the stories, but yeah, as far as
That
like a
I'm
was
gonna
it
tell you right now, there's some really good stories in there, and there's some good horror in there as well.
okay?
Definitely read Rattlesnakes.
Okay.
It's a sequel to Cujo,
Oh,
and it's terrifying.
good. Thank you.
It's absolutely
Okay.
terrifying. It's a bit of a novella as well, but
Okay.
it takes place like 40 years after the
Huh.
Cujo incident, and that's all I'm gonna say.
Huh. Very nice.
It might remind you a little bit of Doohickey,
Okay.
and it's good. It's got some nasty stuff in there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. It's got nasty stuff. Very good. Very
Very good. I like that. I like that. Is there any other like novels by King that you're just like, I don't know?
From a Buick 8.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
They
remember it's been
yeah,
20
you
years
just said
since I
you were
read that
going to
one.
read that pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it when I read it when it first came out and I loved it, but it's been so long. A lot of the podcasts I listen to praise that one, so I just want to revisit it and see if I still enjoy it as much as I did back
It's
in
a
the day.
short one, so I should reread it too. As I recall, the cast, at least the main character, would talk a lot about it wasn't a big deal, so we just kept on going. And it wasn't so much a big deal. And I start thinking, if it's not such a big deal, why are we reading about this?
Yeah, true enough. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the car thing, and I know that's stupid because why Stephen King can't write 2 novels about cars with his 60 novels under his belt. I don't know why. But, Christina from a Buick. I'll reread it and see. But that was a novel of his that was disappointing.
Oh,
I didn't
really?
hate
Yeah.
it because it's his great writing and imagination. But just
You know what? From a Buick 8 isn't like a big. It's not a fan favorite.
yeah.
And when I started listening to Stephen King podcasts, I was surprised that a lot of people on those platforms really enjoy it. I was just like, really? I'm not alone. That's great. What do you think of books like Dreamcatcher?
Dreamcatcher was good. It was solidly good.
Oh, you like that one, right?
Yeah.
Oh, what about the movie adaptation?
Oh my God, that was, well, I'm trying to think back. It was pretty good, I thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I I'm not a I don't know. I thought that Dreamcatcher the book was okay, but the adaptation was rather awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that it, I- that this group of friends, that their greatest moment was when they helped out that kid. I've forgotten his name now. I want
Duddits?
to, I'm sorry?
Duddits?
Yes. He repeated that so many times that was the greatest thing in their life that they did was how Duddits keeps them together. I just didn't buy that.
No,
I just
no.
didn't buy that.
And the movie really like it was the whole Duddits thing. It was just over the
Yeah.
top and
Yep.
kind of
Yeah.
ruined the whole thing.
Yeah. Honestly, the only thing I remember about the movie is when Damian Lewis was in the cabin and he was like putting the mental walls up
Oh yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I couldn't remember. I should say I liked that scene. I liked that scene very much.
The scene that you almost forgot because it's actually how he maintains his memory after being hit by a van.
Oh, good
Yeah.
God, really?
Yeah.
Totally. It's my favorite scene that I don't know.
That's funny.
God.
What'd you think of Lisi's story?
I read that at a very bad time in my life, kind of
Uh-huh.
got me through it. I started reading it again, and her stream of consciousness bugged me a
Yeah.
lot,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, me too. Like that's the book I would name right now my least favorite Stephen King is
I
Lisi's
was thinking,
story.
if I have to listen to her say batch of orifice one more time, I'm going to throw this book across the fucking room.
Yeah. There's a lot of other things. Just that book is just full of like secret language and
Yes.
colloquialisms and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really difficult to plow through, I found. But I've heard that some people hated that book when they first read it and then they reread it and they liked it the second time. So I might give that one a second try at some point. It's
Maybe
like
once you're prepared for what
yeah,
it's going to be.
maybe. I mean, the hardcover book for that is so beautiful. I'm glad to have a copy.
Yeah.
Because do you have the hardcover?
I know I used to. I'm not sure I have it anymore.
I have it
Yep.
right here,
Yeah.
and just like for the podcast people, I'm holding up the hardcover and the naked. book when you take the flap off is
Yep.
like
Yeah.
absolutely incredible, right? Like
Yeah. I love that cover. I
usually
think
they
that's one that I need to get again.
yeah, usually they only do that for books that are like special editions or whatever, right? Oh,
Yeah.
you like my shirt based on the novel
Yes,
by
I love
Stephen
it.
King?
Yep. Yep. In the Stranger Things font. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God. Okay,
Rose
I
Matter, I should mention too. That's a very good book.
oh, I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah.
I
It's
need to move on
about
that.
a abusive relationship. Her husband is incredibly abusive to her, and King writes women very well.
Uh-huh.
He writes gay men terribly, and he does like writing about that magic black person. You know?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's like sometimes an issue. Like that's
Yeah,
in The Shining, right? Yeah.
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 But yeah, Rose Matter is really amazing.
Yeah. I want to read that one. Uh that one and Dolores Claiborne.
Yeah, Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne
Yeah.
together, I like, but
I
yeah,
haven't
Dolores Claiborne was really, really good.
yeah. I haven't read it. I saw the movie when it first came out, and I remember not being very impressed. I was
Yeah,
like,
me
"Yeah, I think
neither.
I'll skip that book," and I still haven't read it, but
The
I
book
want
is
to
so
read
much
it
better.
now. Yeah. Oh, well, it usually is, right?
Well, true.
Yeah. All right. I have a would you rather question.
Ooh.
Ooh. So would you rather read only King novels or his shorter works for the rest of your life?
I've thought about that before. And short stories.
Yeah.
Short stories because there's so many different flavors, and characters, and themes. I would miss reading it,
Hmm.
again,
Yeah.
but and some others, but definitely all of his short stories. If I had all of his short stories, that would
Yeah, me too, honestly. I would pick the short stories, like, this is including the novellas and all that,
yeah,
because there's more.
yeah.
If you have the novels, then you only have, like, just say about 60 or 70 novels, but with the short stories, you have, like, over 2 or 300, maybe 400, right?
Only 60 or 70 now.
Only, yeah, but you have more, and you have a more variety too.
Yeah,
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 because he likes to play with his short stories, he plays with everything,
yeah.
Mr. King does,
Yeah.
but
Well, he really does. And like he said, I think it was him, that in short stories, you don't have to explain everything. In a
yeah.
novel, you have to explain why that happened. In a short story, you don't,
Yeah, yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
You're more free with kind of oh, that was weird. What was up with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you have a favorite short story or novella by King?
The Reaper's Image.
Reaper's Image. What's that from?
It can't be Night Shift. It has to be Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, I
I
think it is
love
Skeleton Crew.
Skeleton Crew to death,
Do you
but
remember what it's about? Because I just read Skeleton Crew, and
it was about they were going through sort of like Citizen Kane's basement with or all kinds of stuff. It was some kind of a lot of antiques or something, and there was like a mirror, and if you saw something in it, you would like something about that. I know it's my favorite short story, and I don't know what it's about,
no,
but
no, I, you know
I
what?
know
I
that it was.
vaguely remember what it's about too, and I just read
Yeah,
it. So how's that?
yeah.
We're two aging men here,
Oh my God.
and
Speak for yourself.
I like speak for you.
23 forever.
Yeah, yeah,
But
20.
Skeleton Crew has so many, like Tales of the Milkman, part one and two.
Oh yeah,
Um,
those are interesting.
Grandma fucking freaked me out.
Yeah, grandma's like out there. What do you think of The Reach? I love that story. It's such like a sentimental kind of dark story.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I like that one. Not as it's one of my least favorite, though,
Oh
I do
yeah.
have to say. Really no reason. It doesn't feel as sharp as many of his short stories in Night Shift and
Mm-hmm.
Skeleton Crew.
Yeah. What do you think of like The Raft?
It's interesting because when I read that, when I reread that, I tried to, like, when he's taken between the slats, I'm thinking, well, how would that even work? That he went through the
Yeah.
slats. Uh, you know, it's just kind of, that's so, it's like that thing about being impossible but plausible, but I don't know. It's just like, how did that happen? There were a couple when I read Night Shift last
Mm-hmm.
that I found like very much a novice writer, doing things like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, he
but I
wrote
love
that
it.
one
But I
fairly
do love
young
it. I
too.
love the raft. I love that the oil slick
Yeah, that
moving
eats people. It's
around.
like the blob on a lake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really love it. It just, and maybe when I read it again, I won't mind that, because it is a cool ending. I'm just trying to think how he would go in there.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. So my favorite, honestly, I'd go with Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. That's
Oh
that's a
no.
favorite of mine. He's like, oh no. I honestly I like Thriller King because he always throws in some supernatural element here and there.
Yeah.
But I just felt myself. I felt like it was kind of it reminded me of reading The Outsider,
Hmm.
except it wasn't quite as intense because she didn't have quite the same impossible situation going on.
Yeah.
What you had was a situation where the guy's innocent, but you have this crazy ass cop coming after you, targeting you, and doing some really nasty shit to you. Uh, I
And
really
he's a very interesting character, which is why
Jalbert,
I am
yeah,
going to go back and finish that, because I do really want to know what happens. I just, uh,
it's a
it's
pretty
like I read
it's a pretty
John
interesting
Stanford
ending,
for
yeah.
detective thrillers.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Let me think here. From If It Bleeds, that collection of novellas. Um, oh, what the hell is it called? The Chuck one. Uh, good. I want to say Good Luck Chuck, but that's not it. It's Life of Chuck. That's it. Life of Chuck is such a weird story and such a weird presentation for King.
Yeah.
It's a not to spoil it, but it's a story that moves backwards, and it starts off in a weird little, almost like apocalyptic situation.
I
But you learn
forgot about that one.
that one is just so weird, but I loved it. It's just like a slice of life and what we're doing here, and it
Yeah.
reminds me of the last story in You Like It Darker. Um, the last story in You Like It Darker is The Answer Man, and that one is another story. It kind of has the same flavor. It's about a guy who comes across. He's not really a psychic, but he is. He doesn't want to be known as a psychic. Anyways, he comes across him 3 times in his life at pivotal moments, and he'll answer as many questions as he can in a certain time limit. And it's just basically a story about life and being alive, and the highs and the lows. I would say those. I would go with those three right now. I could probably name a bunch more, but yeah,
I very much like his dramatic short stories.
they're the ones that
Um,
destroy you.
ah, God. Oh, and I think they're from If It Bleeds, I think. Or maybe slightly after sunset. Batman and Robin have an altercation,
Hmm.
and the one about the the woman and the dog and going into the convenience store. Um, you know, I don't quite remember that one, but there are at least two stories. I'm pretty sure that was one that have no speculative fiction aspects at all. But yeah, just like straight writing. I loved those two.
Hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was just after sunset. So I don't think I've read that one yet, but I will be soon with this show.
It has a lot of great stories in it.
I've read some of the stories in there. Like the gingerbread girl, I think.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah, that one's good. That one's very fun. I like that one. Have you read Full Dark No Stars? Because I should mention that. My
yep.
God, that whole
Yeah.
collection of novellas is like top tier, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was good. Kind of like different seasons, seeing him do that again.
Yeah,
And 4 After Midnight. That's cool that he does that. He gets 4 novellas, and
yeah.
you can't. God, I should have prepared more for this show.
Well, how do you? There's so much content, right?
Yeah, there is.
There's so
There
much
is.
content.
But
All right.
why would I prepare? Because if I don't prepare, if if the show sucks on my end, well, I didn't prepare. But if I do really well, I didn't even prepare for that, man.
Yeah, so either you flop or you don't, right?
Yep.
All right. So, what do you prefer? Like you said that you would go with Stephen King short stories over his novels, but what do you prefer reading though? Because that could be different. Do you prefer his shorter works or his novels?
That's a tough one. I go through phases.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when he does release a collection, I get a little bit more giddy. I'm a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more excited. So, yeah.
Nice. I can't answer this one because I really love his short stories. They're just so easy, I find, to slip into.
Yes.
But I feel giddy whenever he's releasing anything, honestly. Like
Yeah.
Never Flinch is coming out later this year.
Mm.
And I heard that it has a Holly story in it, but from my understanding, it's another, and I could be wrong. It might be just a Holly novel, but I remember reading somewhere that it's a collection of 4 novellas again, or 5, and they're all interconnected, and Holly's in it somehow. So
Hmm. I
I
like
got
when they're interconnected like that.
yeah, I got like a flutter when I heard that. I'm like, ooh, this sounds great.
I have a little tingle myself,
Yeah,
but I won't say where.
yeah. So that's exciting. But yeah, so I don't know, man. I I'm gonna go with novels for now.
Yeah.
Even though I'd pick the short stories over, reading them for the rest of my life. I
Yeah.
just have more fonder memories of reading. And that has nothing to do with me
Same.
doing this podcast either. Like I really love his short stories. I absolutely adore them.
Yeah.
And I want to dive deeper into them. And one reason why I'm doing that, I should mention now that I'm thinking of it, is because I want to learn how to write better short stories. So why not study the king, right?
I just had that thought myself when we were talking about the short stories. I was like,
Yeah,
I really haven't written short stories in a long time. I could use a little bit of a King refresher.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So uh, moving on to the next question. And I should also mention that these are the questions I'm going to be asking new guests whenever they come on. So at least a variation of these questions.
I'm the guinea pig and trying these out on me.
Yeah, and myself too. But yeah, we're going to be asking, like I said, a variation. They're no doubt going to evolve, and some questions will be skipped, and that type of thing. So, next question: Has King ever failed to write a story in your preferred genre or story trope? And if so, what type of story would you like to see Stephen King write? And
My
he's
favorite,
written a lot, right? Like a lot of
yeah,
different
yeah.
things.
But horror is my favorite, so cut and dried he has. Um, I'm not so big into science fiction, but I'll read it. But he covers that in some, most notably Tommy Knockers.
Yeah.
Um, God knows he has enough detective thrillers. And
Uh-huh.
I just gobble up John Sanford. And never been a fantasy, guy, but you have the Dark Tower, so he's covered there. Yeah, there's right now the only thing I wish that he would write more straight up horror. Um, and I'm just going to throw this in there. I hope it doesn't cross another question. But I miss his early works when you could tell he was hungry.
Hmm.
You know, uh, not not like he's lost his edge, but you're starting out. Even through his first few novels, he's still hungry as a
Hmm.
writer. You know, and he's
I
not hungry anymore.
I would disagree in that you saying he hasn't lost his edge. I would say he has lost his edge, but that's not a bad thing at all. I think he's just evolved and matured as a
Yeah,
writer.
yeah. I
Uh,
guess I meant in his writing, in the actual.
oh, you mean like the style and when he would like play around and stuff like
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
yeah,
And make more dense prose and
yes,
yeah,
yes.
okay.
And the characterizations and such. But you know, that's a very well established author. It's not like, and I never get the sense that he's just throwing out trash that's in his head. But I missed when he was hungry.
Yeah, yeah. I think the important thing is that you can still tell that he loves writing still.
Yeah, true.
And that's like you can tell in the prose because even though the prose has changed, it can still come out very beautiful. And he's still like he's the master. Like I'll never be able to write like King, and that's okay. But he's still you can tell he still loves doing it. He
Yes.
he can
And I
tell.
wish I had the productivity that he
Oh
has.
yeah.
I mean, he's so very, that's his full-time job every day. He to use his own bleh, whatever I wanted to say, lingo.
Yeah, yeah.
He slips into the page so easily.
Yeah.
He gets right in there. Um, it takes me a lot longer, but I'm not as I'm yeah, I don't write quite as much as him. My schedule isn't quite so strict. But
Yeah.
yeah, when I do slip into that, and I'm simply reporting what I see, hear, feel, that's an amazing feeling. That's an
Mhm.
amazing feeling. And you can tell that he gets to that point very easily
Yeah.
and fully. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Um, one thing, like Stephen King has played around with this concept in some of his short stories in his earlier collections, like The Jaunt. But I would love to see King write a novel of space horror. I'd love to
yeah,
see. I would
yeah,
love to see what he would do with space horror. Space horror is kind of a very small subgenre of horror, and I think you're going to see more of it as the years go on.
yeah.
But I wanna see what King would do in space and a monster in space. I don't We'll never get that, but I would love to see it regardless.
Maybe we will. And I agree with you on that. I covered sci-fi, but yeah, real sci-fi horror. Like if he wrote Alien, that would have
Mhm.
been
That would
oh,
have been interesting.
yeah.
You would have gotten everyone's life story and how they
Yeah.
got there, and
Yeah.
yeah, that would have been awesome,
It
honestly.
really would have.
It's like have you ever seen the movie? I think it's called Underwater with, the woman who's from, uh uh oh, what the hell is the name of that the Twilight movies?
Yes. Oh, that was good.
I think it could have been better if because the movie starts off with the action almost immediately, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I would have loved some like a lead up to that situation, how they were all got there, what their friendships there were like, what the dramas were like, sort of like Alien,
Yeah.
and then have all that stuff happen.
Yeah.
It's a
I
good
hear
movie,
what you're
yes, but
saying. It just so happened that in that movie, I kind of like that it was, here we go. And, you can
yeah,
feel yourself like blasting away from the characterizations and the backstories and everything. I
yeah.
always prefer that, just like you do. But it worked. It worked.
It did work, but I would have loved to have seen like, the
Yeah.
inside scoop
I
before
agree.
everything gets destroyed, you know?
Yeah.
That's just me though. Um, okay, so, um, do you ever talk to people who are not Stephen King readers?
No. They're dead to me.
I love that. They're dead to me. Okay, let's pretend that you did talk to somebody who's not a King. Okay, how about this? They're not a King fan yet, but they're curious. Where would you direct them to read first? They're dead to me. I love that.
I know. I don't even want to think about this.
Well, the potential
It,
is there, right?
oh, what was that? I'm laughing too hard.
The potential of them becoming a fan is there. You just need to
Yeah,
direct
like
them.
when
So
I
where would
discovered him, there was so much backlog, which was wonderful.
yeah.
I would be hard pressed not to recommend starting with The Stand
Hmm.
because that's where I did. Or Carrie. Carrie. It's short, it's his first one, and it's very strong. And have you ever fucking read that yet?
No, I still haven't.
I even sent you a copy.
Yeah, I still have it too. But it's on my shelf.
I I
Like
oh,
right
there
it's right
it is.
there. But
Sorry, I outed you as a non-Carrie reader.
oh
But yeah,
I
I would say Carrie would be
I
the
will be
first.
reading it soon. Uh I've I've read over 50 King books. I think it's over 55 now. And honestly, like the Carrie story is one that's just never really appealed to me, and I think that's why I haven't read it yet, but I will tackle it soon. So you would take them to Carrie?
Yes.
Okay, that's a good choice, I guess. No.
I
I'm just
could take him right to Pet Cemetery, and that would really make them decide, do I want more or not?
yeah. You know what?
Yeah,
This
sure.
question is kind of uh it's a weird one for me because I don't know where I would take them. 'Cause King is such a wide range of
Yeah,
storytelling, right?
yeah,
So, I don't know, I think I would go with either Misery because that's where I started, like you suggested that,
yeah,
or I might go to one of his, something like You Like It Darker, or
yeah.
not You Like It Darker, sorry, Full Dark, No Stars, because that one has, I think, a good range. It has, like, a little bit of thriller in there, it has some, a little bit of supernatural horror, but it really shows how dark King can get,
Oh, yeah.
and if you're into, like, Dark King, I don't think you know, you the collection You Like It Darker is kind of a cheat title because Full Dark, No Stars is where the darkness is at.
Yeah. Yeah, really,
Yeah,
really. 1922 was just beautifully written.
absolutely, yeah, and it's a
Beaut
phenomenal story, my god.
Yeah.
Oh, it's hard I don't wanna well, I'm gonna spoil a little bit of it here, so if you don't want 1922 spoiled for you, fast forward a little bit, but, that murder scene was hard, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hard to read.
Honestly, the cow scene was really hard because I
Yeah,
empathize so much with animals. That, like, that was the one that really got me.
or how about the
Yeah, that's
rats?
hardcore.
The rats were
Ugh,
nasty. Have you
ugh.
seen the adaptation for that?
Yeah, yep.
I haven't yet,
I thought it was really good.
yeah,
I thought it was really good. The adaptations of his short stories and novellas are much better than his novels because the novels are too rich.
mhm,
You can't make them and unless now they do more limited series, but
yeah, yeah.
it says, the short stories can actually be made into 90-minute,
Movies, yeah,
features very easily.
yeah, and
And
that's a good example too, 1922, it's very from my understanding, 'cause I haven't seen it, but I've heard a lot of people talk that it's very close to the source
yeah,
material, yeah,
yeah, it is. It is.
very cool, and there's other stories, like Misery is kinda like that, it's very close. There's a couple of
It's
changes within the
interesting
story,
because
but
some of the best were directed by Rob Reiner or
okay.
other, like non-genre directors like
Yeah.
Rita Hayworth, Shawshank Redemption, which is not speculative fiction at all. But, turning the body into Stand By Me,
Hmm.
That was excellent.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Misery, that really, and the screenwriter for Misery was so good. He knew what to keep and what to get rid of.
Yeah.
Because in the book, there's, one of the main themes is Paul's addiction to the painkillers.
Yeah.
And that would just be too much in the movie.
Yeah. That would be
And he
hard
knew
to.
to dump it,
Yeah.
because you don't need that in the movie. You just don't need it. So that was a very well done screenplay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. I want to make it a thing. I recently did that with the Shining and Doctor Sleep. I listened or I read the books and then I watched the movies. I haven't watched The Shining yet, but I watched the Doctor Sleep movie. And have you read that
Oh yeah.
Doctor Sleep? Did you see the movie?
Yes.
It's quite the different endings. We don't need to spoil it, but what do you think of the endings?
You know, I honestly don't remember them. I was gonna bullshit my way through. I really was. I really was. But no,
Yeah, I like that.
I don't remember shit.
Yeah, I love that. Okay,
I
we'll just
remember everything until the end. It like gets foggier and foggier the further
yeah,
it
yeah.
gets in.
We'll
But
discuss.
oh yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. I didn't. That was too
It's
weird
like
for me.
two different endings. Two
Yes.
different endings. The
Yep.
opposite happens in each.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I found that interesting, and it was a lot of fun to do. I
I
kind of
didn't
wished.
really care for the ending of either one. It just, I don't know. I had to prepare myself before Doctor Sleep to not be expecting a sequel to The Shining. I
Yeah.
had to just prepare myself for this is just another Stephen King book that kind of touches on stuff in The Shining. I
Yeah.
had to do that so that I wouldn't be disappointed because talking about the 70s style and the rich paragraphs, The Shining came from that.
Hmm.
And Dr. Sleep came from the more modern staccato writing, lots of blank space and
Yeah. Yeah.
everything. So their styles are so completely different. I knew that I had to take it, more for what it's worth. Just weirdly enough, like Kubrick's The Shining,
Hmm.
you have to separate those two.
You do.
Kubrick's The Shining and Stephen King's novel The Shining are two completely different things.
Hmm.
Just kind of the saying, touching on some of the same
Yeah.
thing.
And
Yeah.
honestly, I love both.
Yes, me too. When you can separate them, they're
Mhm.
both great.
Yeah, and I can. I honestly, I was familiar with the movie way before the book, and I liked I think the book is better, but
Oh
the
yeah.
movie is it's a classic, and
Yep.
I think it's good too. But a lot of people, King included, don't like the movie.
Oh God, does he ever not like that movie?
Yeah, I think he takes it a little personally.
He
I don't know
does. He
because
does,
he
doesn't
took
he?
the book personally. It's a very personal story to him.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And the thing about and I watched some of the limited series. The biggest thing was how Kubrick made Jack kind of a evil sort of, kind of guy right away.
Hmm.
It wasn't that much of a descent for him. And in the novel, his dad was Danny's favorite. They had such a father-son bond.
Yeah.
And that's what really hooks in
Yeah,
with Jack's descent is that Danny doesn't have the dad that he loved so much.
and,
And Jack's getting away from his son, and The Shining is making him kind of hate his boy.
yeah, and
So that's
yeah,
yeah.
the Jack Torrance in the book, he has a lot of demons when
Yeah.
you're introduced to him, like, he hits a kid at school, and he loses his
Yep.
job. He accidentally broke his son's arm,
Yep.
uh, but he's trying to
And
be
the greatest I love when he and his friends were out drinking Martians, the martinis, and they
yeah,
ran into that bike in the middle of absolutely nowhere.
yeah, yeah,
And
and
and they
and they
looked
were
at the
like,
rest of the
there
body
was nobody
anywhere.
there, yeah,
Yeah. And
And then
what
they
was
were
this
like,
bike doing out there? That
that
was
was
just
tense. Like,
spooky and
and you can picture it like that being
yeah,
real. Like, because
yeah,
they were, it's important to mention that they were both shit-faced drunk
yeah, yep,
driving, and they don't know if they hit somebody or not. And so they
yeah,
just kind of left it. And it never appeared that somebody was dead. They just ran over a bike that was like
yeah,
lying in the middle of the road.
for no reason.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. But the thing I like about Jack in the books is that, he does bad things, but he when we meet him, he's trying to be a better person.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they make the terrible decision of going to the Overlook Hotel, which is a bad decision because it's not a good place, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to play up on Jack's. It wants the son, and so it's willing to take all of them though, but it's going
Yeah.
to use Jack to get to him,
Yeah.
and it just fucks him up, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean the big um axe, through the doors, Shelley Long is screaming her bloody head off.
yeah,
That's good, but in the book with the croquet mallet just
yeah.
pounding on the walls as he goes, that's really
That's scary.
that
But
is
he,
scary. I mean, that is flat out things that you think about as you're lying awake in bed at night.
yeah, like being a 5-year-old and seeing that coming for you, and somebody that who's supposed to keep you safe is coming
Ugh,
at you like that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh, makes me feel all icky and weird.
it
Oh,
does, doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So, final question here: if you were ever to meet Stephen King and you only had one thing you could talk to him about, what would it be?
I would tell Stephen King that he saved my life because I had, I'm going to get a little teary. I had terrible, terrible childhood as far as school went. It was a very small class. It was a parochial school, so you know, not a lot of people. All the kids were like rich and athletic, and there was just bookish old me. And as I got older and older, it got worse and worse and worse. But I discovered King right when it started getting really bad
Hmm.
school. And I would even stay home from school sometimes and read King. And I don't know what, you know, would have happened, but he really did save my life with his work. He got me through those last few years until I escaped to high school. So I would want him to know that.
Awesome. That's you're not the only one to feel that way.
Yeah.
I felt that way with just reading itself.
Yeah.
But I kind of wish I found King earlier. It's funny because I did try to read it when I was like 9 years old, and it was just a little bit too much for me at the time.
Yeah.
But the copy of it that I have is from like when I was like 9 years old.
Yeah.
It's like a big, that giant paperback book. But I tried reading that when I was like 9, and like I said, it was a little bit daunting, so I DNF'd it. But
Yeah.
yeah. But anyways, yeah. As for me, I would ask him where his space horror story is.
There you go.
No, actually, that's sort of cutting around the edge. I would honestly ask him. I would want to know, because as we mentioned earlier, Pet Cemetery is a book he pulled out of his desk, had no intention of publishing. I would want to know what else he has in that shelf.
Me too, in that trunk. I swear I remember him saying somewhere that he has a trunk novel for every novel that he's published, which
Yeah.
is probably might not be true anymore. But I can see that, with like some bands, like when U2 released Zootropa
Mm-hmm.
right after Octoon Baby,
Mm-hmm.
and you could tell that Zoo, uh, Zootopia, Zootopia. I
Zootopia.
don't
Yeah.
know anything anymore. It was like the residual shit, from that. And Pink Floyd, when they did, and nobody wanted this except Roger Waters, when they did the final cut after The Wall.
Mm-hmm.
So I so I can understand a writer like King who can produce so much. And I think at one time, I swear that he said that, he has just enough energy like to wind down. He'll write a whole other novel, but it's just not good enough to publish.
Yeah, I just want to know what's in there. There might be some
Yeah,
really interesting
me
things.
too. We're gonna have to wait until he kicks the bucket and his estate.
That might happen, but it might not too, right? Like,
Yeah,
but I don't want Stephen King to die.
that's gonna be dark.
It's gonna be awful, man.
Yeah,
But like, uh I don't know what I'm gonna do when that happens. I think honestly, I think I'll cry.
yeah, yeah.
He's
David
like my
Lynch,
favorite author. David Lynch was
passed
hard.
away.
Yeah, he passed
That
away.
I didn't cry, but I was depressed for a couple days.
I was too. I love David Lynch, but he's nowhere near where Stephen King is for me.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I
yeah,
love David Lynch. He was like, oh my God, like he did some crazy ass stuff that is
yeah,
just fun and dark to watch.
yeah.
Um,
And he did so much other things. I used to have his book of photography.
mhm. He
He
was a
just
painter.
recorded some music. He just really was. That's what I consider genius is when somebody is like so good, in that, and their creativity goes in all those different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's like that's sort of like King if you think about it, because he goes everywhere. He just writes. I don't think he paints
Yeah,
or anything like that. But his stories, he writes in so many different genres. Um, like mostly, I guess it's horror and now thriller. But he has bounced around, like with the Dark Tower series, that was
yeah,
fantasy, with some science fiction elements. He's written in science fiction before, Tommy Knockers,
yeah.
Under the Dome. Um, he jumps around. He doesn't just stick with one. He does dramas, uh,
Yes.
like contemporary type stories,
Yeah.
and yeah. So he's somewhat similar to that. Like when I finished reading Lisi's story, I knew that book is personal to him because it's basically like a love letter to his marriage, and in that book, the male writer character is constantly referring to himself as a genius, and I was like, oh, that's a far take, isn't it, Mr. King? But after I finished reading it, I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? Stephen King is a genius. He's a fucking genius, and so it's not really a terrible thing for him to toot his own horn, so to speak.
Yeah, really. I love in the Dark Tower series when Stephen King is introduced as a character. I won't say
Yeah, yeah,
anything
yeah.
more, but that was
That
that
blew
was
me
so
away. I love that.
thrilling. Yeah,
That was like some of the best parts of the Dark Tower, in my opinion.
it was. That was
Yeah,
like it just it was. It
yeah,
just got really awesome.
it was. All right, so we reached the end of episode 1 here, I think.
May I tell an interesting story
Yeah, go ahead.
before we leave? King was talking with Chuck Palahniuk about like fans and everything right after Palahniuk released Fight Club. And there was a signing. Stephen King was doing a signing, and just the hordes of people that come. At one point, his callus or blister popped, and he got some blood on the guy's page.
Yeah.
And when the rest of the crowd found out that the guy had some of Stephen King's blood on his page, they all clamored. They all wanted some of Stephen King's blood on
Oh
their
my God.
pages, and it just became a nightmare. So that was King's warning
That's
to
a
Poloniak that that's what fame can get you. So,
that's a short story right there.
it
Because I
is,
could
isn't
I
it?
could imagine the people tearing him apart just to get the blood on their pages.
I'm writing that. That's mine. I know that was your idea, but I'm stealing it.
I like that. That's mine.
Stealing
I'm taking it.
it.
Oh, that's awesome. All
Oh,
right. So, that is episode 1. We survived. So, next episode we're starting chronologically here. So, I guess I should have explained this at the beginning. My God. My God. Getting old sucks. We're going to be talking about the collections in chronological order as they came out. So the first collection is Night Shift, and the first
Yes.
story for that is Jerusalem's Lot.
Yum,
And we
yum.
will be discussing that next time. I'm going to have a couple of guests on,
Yay.
and Michael's going to be one of them.
Yes.
And so I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Michael, for coming on board.
Of course. Stay dark, my friends.
Stay dark indeed, and may you have twice the number.
Thank you.